My dad slammed his hand on the table and screamed in front of everyone, "Pay your rent or get out." The room went silent. My sister's fork froze mid-air. My brother smirked like he had been waiting for this moment. And me, I just smiled, stood up, and walked away without a word. They thought they had finally broken me. What they didn't know was that the house they used to threaten me with had never been theirs. It was mine all along. And when I secretly sold it for $840, the ground beneath them shattered. When the eviction notice arrived, my father called me in a panic, begging, cursing, desperate. But my response left him speechless, and it was the moment I finally chose myself. Before I share my story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say "listening" in the comments or let me know where you are. I love hearing how far my story can reach. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now, here's my story. My name is Indigo, and for years I was the family's forgotten son, forced to live in the basement of the house I secretly owned. What happened after that dinner not only changed my life, it exposed every lie they built their power on. If my story touches you, please consider subscribing to this channel. Your support means more than you know. It reminds me I'm not alone, and it gives me strength to keep telling the truth. My father's words, "pay your rent or get out," still ring in my skull like a bad chord. But this isn't the moment they were spoken. This is the moment before the slow simmer that taught me how to hold my breath underwater. I'm Indigo Voss, 31, living in the basement of a craftsman house in West Asheville that smells like cut pine and damp wool. The ceiling is low enough that I've learned where to duck. The narrow window coughs up a slice of daylight that crawls across the concrete floor like a shy cat. I work at a narrow desk with a laptop scarred by stickers from bands that never went mainstream, and in the corner sits my mother's guitar, its mahogany side rubbed smooth where her forearm used to rest. Above the desk, 3 small canvases. Saffrons lean off the wall, a red fox, a blue mountain, a hand gripping a handful of seeds. On paper, the irony would read as comedy. The deed to this house has my name on it. My signature, the notary's seal, the whole ritual. But upstairs, Sterling, my father moves through rooms like a warden and calls me his tenant. He retired from real estate with the posture of a man who thinks retirement should come with a title, and now he lives as if the house pays him a pension. He's made a routine out of not knocking. The first time he came down without warning, I started sleeping with the basement door locked. He learned to rattle it like a landlord. Marigold, my stepmother, counts pennies out loud as if the sound of coins will shame them into multiplying. She'll scan the power bill with a pen cap clenched in her teeth and tell me you're running the AC like a Hotel Indigo even when the unit we share is old enough to qualify for Social Security. She calls me a freeloader with a straight face while cashing the Zelle transfer I send for utilities every month. If I don't show the receipt, she asks for screenshots. Caspian, my older brother by 5 years, appears when the air smells like desperation. He owns a yoga studio no one can afford and sells the word alignment like it's a cure. He is always about to turn the corner financially. The corner never arrives. When he comes by, he drifts toward my basement door like a compass, searching for north hands tucked in the pockets of linen pants, voice soft at first, and then sharp. He doesn't bring food or coffee or good news. He brings needs. Saffron, my kid sister, brings coffee. She's 20, a student at the art school downtown, and the only person in this house who checks on me because she wants to, not because she wants something. She knocks the way you whisper in a library, sets a paper bag on my desk, croissant usually, and perches on the edge of the mattress to show me the ink stains on her hands. They had me closing again, she says, and the steam from the cup fogs the window. She asks what I'm working on, and I show her album art drafts, a run of posters for an indie band in Portland, a rebrand for a non-profit that wants their logo to feel like sunrise, but serious. She nods solemnly, which is how I know she loves me. At night, I rest the guitar against my knee and find the chords my mother used to fish out of the air. Aurora Voss died when I was 14, cancer that didn't negotiate, and the house I grew up in had a kitchen that smelled like lemon oil and harmonies. She had calluses on her fingertips and a laugh that made me want to write it down. "Don't let anyone take your voice," she'd say, tapping my throat lightly like a priest. In this basement, the words echo. Sometimes I can hear her on the stairs, not knocking, but in a gentle way, as if the wood is remembering her weight. Here's the part that sounds like fiction. 8 years ago, I won $2.5 million in the lottery. Not the billboard kind. The quiet kind you don't tell anyone about if you understand human nature. I was 23 and working 2 gigs designing logos for food carts by day, playing coffee houses by night when the numbers aligned. I hired a lawyer and made a vow that would sound cruel if I hadn't known the people in my own family keep it secret. I bought this house in West Asheville with cash, painted the trim, refinished floors, told my father we should split expenses, then set up a system that allowed me to transfer money from one account with my name to another account with my name while he called it rent. He believed because belief served him. I kept quiet because silence protected me. People imagine money as freedom. Maybe it is if you don't share a hallway with someone who thinks you owe him your oxygen. In this house, my voice had to learn patience. Upstairs, Sterling was master of the domain he did not own. Down here, I was the owner no one saw. It was a joke I told myself so I wouldn't scream. Mornings start the same. The door to the basement shudders. Sterling's knuckles rap hard enough to make the guitar string hum. "Just checking you're alive," he says, which is code for, "Are you working? Are you worth anything today?" He doesn't wait for an answer. His slippers slap the stairs, and I hear the coffee machine above me grind stale beans. I tie my hair back, open the laptop, and watch the cursor blink at a blank canvas while I wait for my pulse to slow. By 9, Marigold is pacing. "This bill is obscene," she announces to the house, which is the same as announcing it to me. Air conditioning is not a birthright. She doubles, underlines numbers with a ballpoint pen until the paper tears. I could say I paid that last night like I always do before the due date. I could staple receipts to her refrigerator. Instead, I upload files to a client folder, invoice a folk trio from Ohio, and add a line item I never send to anyone: emotional overhead. Around noon, the doorbell dings and the day takes on Caspian's perfume, eucalyptus, and urgency. He's brought the performance, this time his wife in a soft cream sweater and their toddler holding a plastic truck, the picture of domesticity with a crack in the frame. Indigo, he starts, voice hushed in faux privacy. I hate to ask. He does not hate to ask. He loves to audition for sympathy. The studio's close. Really close. We had a water leak and the insurance is stalling. I need a bridge, 10 grand. That's it. We'll be square before you know it. Square is a word that means I'll see you again next month. I can't. I tell him, and I make my face still because if I let a single muscle twitch, he'll call it guilt. Freelance is tight right now. I'm juggling invoices. I'm sorry. His eyebrows arc, the compassion mask slipping. You can't, or you won't. He glances toward the basement like money grows under the stairs. I show up for this family, man. I show up. And you. He gestures at the small of the house. You hide. I pay the bills, I say quietly. He smiles without humor. With whose money, dads, you think you're a hero because you cover a couple electric bills? The toddler drops the truck. It clatters. His wife says nothing, eyes on the floor. I'm not a bank, I say. His voice spikes. You're a leech. A musician who never made it, a designer for people who can't afford real agencies. You live in Dad's basement and act like you're owed something. It's an old wound reopened with practiced fingers. I feel my mother's hand on my throat, phantom light. Don't let them take your voice. I swallow and choose not to shout. The refusal is a clean cut. He storms out, rehearsing new lines, and the house exhales when the door slams. Marigold appears in the doorway to the basement with a fresh stack of paper, the power bill perched on top like a crown. New policy, she announces. Utilities are going up to $400 a month. Energy costs are up, everything's up, and we can't carry you. She softens for a beat that isn't compassion, just theater. We're thinking of putting in a separate meter down here. Fair is fair. Fair is a word people use when they want you to fund their comfort. I nod because arguing would be a show and I don't perform for free. Later, when I transfer the $400 to the account I created to keep track of the charade, I title the memo line exactly what it is: payment to self for peace and quiet. It doesn't land as a joke anymore. It lands like confession. I am paying rent to live in my own house. I am underwriting the performance of a family that calls me a burden. That night I carry a trash bag of recycling to the curb and pause in the shadow of the hydrangeas when I hear my father's voice on the porch. He's on his phone pacing the boards I refinished with my own hands. Yeah, he's saying cheerful in the way men get when they talk about money that isn't theirs. Soon. I'll have the basement cleared out by the end of the month. Kid's a deadweight. I could pull $2,000 easy just for that space. Maybe more if I let somebody run a kiln or a studio. West Asheville's hungry. He laughs a dry scrape. You know me. I don't leave money on the table. I freeze behind the shrub like a thief, though I'm only stealing the truth. The evening air smells like rain on warm concrete. He keeps talking about me like I'm furniture, about the basement like I'm a stain he'll scrub out. There's pride in his voice, the kind he used to save for closing deals, the kind he never found for me. Something inside me goes very, very still. It feels like standing in a lake and realizing your toes have found the solid cool of bedrock. I see the house as it truly is, a prop, a stage, a set for a story in which I play the fool. I think of Saffron's fox on my wall, ears lifted mid-step, eyes bright as if caught just before it bolts. I think of my mother's hand on my throat again. Don't let anyone take your voice. Upstairs, the porch light clicks off. My father's silhouette moves past the living room window. A lamp flickers, and with it a heat that has nothing to do with the broken AC. By the time the lock slides home, I've rehearsed the one sentence I will not say out loud, not yet, not to him. This house is mine. Instead, I carry the recycling to the curb and set the bin down gently, as if quiet hands can make the ground less likely to shift. I go back inside past Marigold's stack of bills and the family pictures that don't include my mother, down the stairs to the room where I am both renter and owner, prisoner and guard. I close the door and lean the guitar against my knee. The first chord lands like a decision. I may not speak tonight, but the basement hears me. The house hears me. And for the first time in years, I hear myself. The night of the dinner felt like theater, only no one realized they were performing for an audience of one. The dining room glowed with the warm light of the chandeliers Sterling had bragged about buying second-hand from an estate sale. He said it gave the house character, but to me it always looked like a trophy he never really earned. The table was set Marigold's best attempt at civility, laid out in porcelain plates and mismatched silverware. She fussed with the napkins as if their folds could hide the cracks in the family sitting around them. Sterling sat at the head naturally because he believed every room belonged to him. Caspian lounged with false ease, stretching his arms as though he had built the house with his own hands. Marigold at his right leaned forward with a smile that cut more than it welcomed. Saffron sat across from me, her eyes already apologizing for what hadn't yet been said. Dinner began with Sterling holding court, reliving what he called the golden days. He spoke about closing deals in Asheville when the market was still manageable, when every house he touched turned to profit. He spoke as though he had built the city with his bare hands, and with each exaggerated story, he slid a glance at me just long enough to remind everyone who hadn't measured up. Caspian chimed in next, describing the expansion plans for his yoga studio. The energy is shifting, he said, voice silky, as if spirituality could erase unpaid bills. People are craving connection. I'm thinking of opening a second space, maybe offer teacher training. Real growth is right around the corner. His words hung in the air like incense, pleasant, until you realized it was covering something sour. I felt their eyes shift toward me like a cue. I said nothing. I had learned silence is louder than defense in this house. Marigold leaned back and sighed as though the weight of the world was on her shoulders. If Indigo would just pay his rent on time, we wouldn't have to stretch so thin. She stabbed her fork into roasted chicken, her gaze landing on me like a blade. It's not asking too much, is it? Everyone here carries their share. My jaw tightened, but before I could even breathe a response, Sterling slammed his spoon down against the table so hard the glasses trembled. His face burned red, and in that moment he looked less like a man and more like a fire about to consume everything near it. Pay your rent now or get out. His voice thundered through the room. I'm done carrying you. I will not feed a man who refuses to stand on his own 2 feet. The word should have humiliated me, but all I felt was the strange calm of a storm that had already passed. Caspian laughed under his breath, leaning back as if he'd been waiting for this moment. Finally he muttered, shaking his head with that smug smirk. Marigold nodded firmly, sealing the verdict like a judge delivering a sentence. Across the table, Saffron's voice broke through, small but defiant. "He does pay, Dad. He's been helping. You know he has." Sterling cut her off with a wave of his hand, dismissing her words as though they were no more than a child's interruption. "Stay out of this, Saffron. You don't understand." The silence that followed was thick, every eye on me, waiting for an outburst. But anger never came. Instead, I smiled, a quiet curve of lips that carried more power than shouting ever could. I pushed my chair back slowly, the scrape of wood against the floor the only sound in the room. Without a word, I stood, walked away from the table, and left them staring at the empty space I'd occupied. In their minds, my silence was surrender. They mistook calm for defeat. Let them. Because inside the words were already forming, and they weren't for them to hear. They were for me, for the truth I had kept buried. This house was never theirs. Not a wall, not a window, not a single nail. Every dollar I had paid fell right back into my own pocket. And soon they would learn what that meant. Back in the basement, the air felt different, heavier but sharper too. I shut the door behind me and let the darkness swallow me whole. My guitar leaned in the corner, waiting. I sat on the edge of the bed and held it across my lap, not to play, but to anchor myself. My father's words still vibrated through my body, but beneath the sting, something harder had settled in clarity. I wasn't angry, not the way they expected. I wasn't broken. I was awake. The memory of my mother came back then, as it always did when I was cornered. Aurora's soft voice carrying through late nights, her hand tapping my throat like a reminder. Don't ever let them take your freedom. She was gone, but her voice hadn't left me. It lingered in the strings and the walls and the marrow of who I had become. I looked around the basement, the life I had shrunk myself into. The laptop still open on the desk, sketches glowing faintly on the screen. The paintings Saffron had given me, little pieces of her heart pinned to the wall. The guitar that held my mother's fingerprints in its wood. These were the things that mattered, the things that belonged to me. The rest I could walk away from. I started to gather them, the laptop into its case, the sketches into a folder, the guitar into its worn, soft case. I pulled Saffron's paintings from the wall, carefully sliding them into a portfolio. It felt like packing more than objects. It felt like reclaiming myself. When the bag was zipped, I sat again and opened my browser. Asheville's real estate market lit up in numbers and headlines, the same market Sterling used to boast about conquering. Prices had climbed even higher than I imagined. The house I sat in this prison masquerading as home was worth far more than it had been when I bought it 8 years ago. For the first time in years, I felt the weight tip in my favor. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had found after half an hour of research. It rang twice before a steady voice answered. "Theo Ramsey," he said. I swallowed once. "Theo, my name is Indigo Voss. I own a house in West Asheville. I'd like to sell it." Quietly. My family can't know. There was a pause on the line, long enough that I thought he might laugh. But then his tone shifted into professional precision. "All right, Mr. Voss. Let's talk." That call ended with the promise of discretion and a first step toward freedom. I set the phone down, my chest rising with something that felt dangerously like hope. And then the conflict came rushing back, a wave of memory and doubt. Selling meant erasing the place where my mother's laughter once lived. It meant closing the door on a chapter I had tried so hard to endure. Could I really trade walls that held her voice for walls that meant nothing? Could I abandon the garden she once told me could bloom forever? The silence stretched, and then came a knock on the door. Heavy, impatient. Sterling's voice followed, sharp as ever. A paper slipped under the frame. "Rent's due on the 1st. Don't be late again. Or get out." His footsteps retreated before I could reply. I picked up the paper and stared at the inked ultimatum. For a long moment I just stood there. Then the corners of my mouth lifted unbidden. A smile, quiet but steady. because the truth was I wasn't going to pay him a cent. Not now. Not ever again. By day, I played the role they expected of me, the compliant tenant who handed over his rent on time, who rose early enough to appear employed, who never gave them cause to question his routine. I carried myself as though I had accepted their rules, even when those rules were shackles. At night, I lived another life. The desk lamp in the basement burned long after the rest of the house fell silent, casting its small circle of light over stacks of papers, the original deed tax forms, and the contract I had signed in 2017. Every page bore my name, proof that the foundation under their feet had always belonged to me. Theo Ramsey called late, his voice measured and precise. "We'll need to confirm inspections quietly. I'll work around your family's schedule," he said. His professionalism steadied me. Together we mapped out a path that could lead me out of this house without their knowledge until it was too late. But the cracks began to show. Marigold noticed my hours in the basement had grown longer. One evening she cornered me at the kitchen counter, her nails tapping the granite like a metronome. "What's keeping you down there all the time?" she asked. Her smile was thin, her eyes sharp. I told her I'd picked up new clients' graphic work that demanded late nights. She tilted her head, studying me, then gave a clipped laugh. "Well, it's about time you earned something." She walked away, seemingly satisfied, though suspicion still trailed behind her like perfume. Caspian appeared again, this time at the basement door, his tone less dramatic than before, but no less desperate. "I just need $2,000, he said, eyes restless. "Bridge money. It'll cover a short-term loan until the studio's back on its feet." I shook my head. "I can't help you." His jaw tightened, his face darkening. "You never help. You sit on whatever it is you've got, acting like the world owes you nothing. One day, Indigo, I'm going to find out what it is you're hiding. And when I do, don't expect me to let it go." He left with a slam of the door that echoed down the stairs. The threat hung heavy in the air long after he was gone. Days later in the garden, I found myself speaking with Juniper Lane, the ceramicist who lived next door. Her hands were dusted with clay as she knelt beside her herbs, her hair tied back carelessly. She was warmth embodied, a reminder that not every neighbor was an enemy. "You've kept those pear trees alive better than Sterling ever did," she said with a smile. Then she added almost idly, "Did you hear the house on the corner sold for $950? If you owned this place, you could walk away with enough to start fresh anywhere." I froze her words, cutting closer than she realized. I didn't answer, but I didn't need to. My silence was enough. Inside, her suggestion rooted itself deeper. The clock on my escape had started ticking faster. Within a week, I signed a lease on a small apartment downtown, a bare-bones place with a month-to-month contract. It wasn't much, just a bedroom, a narrow kitchen, and a balcony overlooking the street, but it was mine. Or it would be once I left. I moved my most precious belongings there in stages: the guitar, the laptop, Saffron's paintings. Everything else could remain behind, abandoned like a shell I had outgrown. Then came the night Sterling hosted his old friends, a gathering I wasn't invited to. Their laughter carried through the floorboards, punctuated by Sterling's booming voice. I sat in the basement, hearing every word as clearly as if I'd been at the table. "I'm raising his rent next month," he declared. "If he can't pay, I'll throw him out. This house will make me money one way or another. After all, it's mine." I leaned back in my chair, letting the bitterness wash through me. My smile was sharp this time, cutting through the dark. "No, Father." I whispered to the silence, "Not for much longer." The double life wore on me. Each morning I dragged myself up the stairs, acting the part of the man too poor to matter, the man clinging to scraps his father allowed him. Each evening I returned to my hidden world, combing through contracts with Theo, arranging for private showings, while Sterling and Marigold ran errands or visited friends. It was a balancing act, and the rope beneath my feet grew thinner every day. Theo reassured me. "We'll time the visits carefully," he said. "No one will suspect until the papers are signed." His confidence steadied me, but beneath it, unease simmered. It didn't take long for Caspian to notice. One afternoon, he strolled into the yard unannounced, catching me off guard as I passed a folder of documents to Theo by the pear trees. His eyes narrowed, scanning the exchange like a predator catching a scent. "What was that?" he asked sharply. Some kind of lease. Don't tell me you're renting this place out behind Dad's back. I forced a chuckle, sliding the papers under my arm. Graphic contracts. New client. You wouldn't understand. His gaze lingered too long before he finally shrugged, through the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. He walked off without another word, but I could feel suspicion trailing him like a shadow. Later that week, Saffron slipped into the basement, her voice soft, carrying exhaustion I recognized too well. I can't stand it anymore, she admitted. Dad's rules, his shouting, the way he acts like everything's his. I feel like I can't breathe in this house. I wanted to tell her everything, to open the door to freedom we could both walk through. But the image of her caught between me and Sterling's wrath stopped me cold. She was the only person who had ever seen me, truly seen me. I couldn't risk pulling her into the storm that was about to break. So I lied. I told her it would get better, that she should hang on. The words tasted like ash. The real danger arrived one evening when Theo miscalculated. He brought a couple by earlier than planned, guiding them through the living room just as Sterling came home with groceries. I was in the basement when I heard the heavy slam of the front door, then Sterling's bark of surprise. "What the hell is this?" His voice boomed through the house. "Who are you people? Why are you in my home?" Theo tried to smooth it over, apologizing for the mistake, ushering the clients out as quickly as possible. By the time Sterling stormed down to the basement, his face was flushed with fury. He waved his arms, demanding answers. "Some strangers just walked through my house, Indigo. They said they were here to see the property." "What did you do?" I looked up from my desk, feigning confusion. They must have had the wrong address. "It happens all the time, Dad. Realtors around here mix things up." He glared, suspicion etched deep, but after a long moment he exhaled sharply and stormed back upstairs. His trust, fragile as glass, hadn't shattered entirely. Not yet. I leaned back in my chair, my hands shaking despite my calm face. The walls felt tighter, the air heavier. I knew now that the game had shifted. I couldn't drag this out much longer. The house was still mine, but the secret was slipping through the cracks. The time had come to finish what I started before everything exploded. Tension in the house had thickened to the point where every meal felt like a battlefield. Sterling no longer bothered to keep his disdain behind closed doors. At dinner with guests sipping wine in the living room, he declared loudly, "He'll be out of here soon. I won't keep feeding a grown man who can't carry his own weight." Marigold nodded in sharp agreement, adding, "We've given him enough time. By next month, this house will finally be ours again." I sat silently, chewing slowly, tasting the irony more than the food. Their voices carried through the walls of a house they had never owned, their confidence built on a lie I had allowed them to believe. It was almost laughable, if not for the weight of their contempt pressing down on me. But it wasn't their mockery that kept me awake that week. It was Caspian. He had grown restless, suspicious, and his eyes lingered too long whenever he passed me in the hall. I should have seen it coming the day he waited until I was gone to sift through the basement, his greed sharper than his caution. When I returned, I found him in the corner, the faint smell of dust and paper clinging to the air. He wasn't holding my guitar or sketchbooks. He was holding a folded page, yellowed at the edges, my name printed clearly at the top. The deed. Caspian's face was pale, but his eyes burned with sudden feral hunger. "So this is it," he whispered, almost reverent. "All this time, you're the one who owns it." He folded the paper, carefully slipping it into his jacket. "I should take this straight to Dad, but I won't if you make it worth my while." Later that night, he cornered me in the garden, pulling the document halfway from his pocket like a magician revealing his trick. $50,000, he said bluntly. "That's the price of my silence. Otherwise, Sterling will know everything by morning." The ground seemed to tilt beneath me. My secret, guarded so carefully, had shifted into his hands. But I met his gaze and forced my voice steady. "No, I don't pay blackmail." His smirk faltered. "You think I'm bluffing?" "You can tell him," I said, stepping closer, lowering my voice. "But think about it. He won't believe you without proof. He'll see it as another one of your scams, and when you lose that proof, you'll have nothing. No money, no leverage, and no chance to ever come back to me with your hand out again." For a moment, Caspian just stared, jaw-clenched, knuckles white around the page. Then with a sound between a laugh and a curse, he shoved it back into his pocket and stormed away. I stood alone, the night heavy around me. I had won a round, but only just. The truth was no longer mine alone. I knew then that I couldn't wait. The house had to be sold, and soon. Any delay would mean losing everything. The call came on a quiet morning. Theo's voice carried the weight of finality. "We've got an offer, 840,000. Strong buyer. I recommend we accept." My heart pounded, but my voice was calm. "Do it." The papers were signed in days. I moved the last of my belongings to the downtown apartment, packing only what mattered, leaving behind the walls that had caged me for years. The strings that had tethered me to that basement snapped clean. It was not me but them who received the news first. A letter from the realty company arrived, neat and impersonal, informing the current occupants, Sterling and Marigold, that the property had been sold. They had 30 days to vacate. I wasn't there, but I imagined the moment. Sterling at the kitchen table, Marigold reading aloud, her voice cracking halfway through. Sterling tearing the letter from her hand, his face reddening as he spat. "This is a mistake. This is my house." The paper crumpled in his fist, thrown across the room as he roared. Not long after, my phone rang. His voice was hoarse, frantic. "What the hell did you do with the rent money? Did you know about this? Tell me the truth. Are you behind this?" I held the phone to my ear, let the silence stretch, then answered evenly. "Yes, Father. I am behind it. The house has always been mine. I bought it 8 years ago with money you never knew I had. All these years you weren't my landlords. You were guests." There was a pause, so deep it seemed to pull the air out of the line. Then came the shouting words I had heard my whole life, twisted into new shapes of rage. "Liar, betrayer. After everything, after all I gave you." Marigold called not long after, her voice breaking with sobs. She begged me to reconsider, to undo what I'd done, to remember that I was their child. Caspian followed minutes later, his tone transformed from threat to plea. "You don't have to cut me out. We can work something out. Just help me, please." But my answer was the same to each of them. Cold. Final. No. To Caspian I added, "You had your chance. You wasted it." The 30 days ticked like a drumbeat I no longer had to march to. When I visited the house one last time, it was nearly empty, boxes stacked against the walls. I stood in the hallway, the air heavy with dust and memory, and thought of Aurora. I closed my eyes and whispered to the silence, "I kept your promise, Mother." I chose freedom. Then I turned and stepped out the door, shutting behind me with a thud that echoed like the closing of a chapter. For the first time in years, I felt the air on my face without weight. The house that had been my prison, my secret, my weapon, was no longer mine to carry. It was gone, and with it, so was the hold they had over me. After Christmas, I left the group chat's accusations behind, carrying Sage's memory book and our truth forward. Aspen's cafe apology marked a turning point. She chose us over Sterling's polished world, tearing his terms to pieces. With Indigo's support and Sage's drawing anchoring us, we vowed to stand together. The fight wasn't over, but we were ready. My new downtown apartment felt like a fresh start, its wide windows framing the Blue Ridge's fiery sunsets. No more Sterling's cabinet slamming or Marigold's shouts, just quiet and light. Word of our stand spread, and their circle shrank as their betrayal tales rang hollow. Caspian's calls came relentlessly, veering from pleas to threats of exposing my lies online. But I'd laid the truth bare. His words were empty. One afternoon, Sterling showed up in his old blazer, feigning peace. "Blood is blood," he said, eyes scanning my new life. Then the pivot. "How much lottery money's left? I could double it." I cut him off. "You're not here for family, you want my wallet. I'm not yours to claim." His mask fell, and he left, footsteps echoing. At Saffron's cafe, I told her about the house sale, the years of secrets. Her eyes widened, hurt but understanding. "You should have told me," she said softly. "I wanted to protect you. I replied, offering her a $100,000 trust fund for art school, no strings attached. Because you never took, you just wanted to be seen. Tears welled, but she accepted. Caspian stormed in days later, furious about the trust. You give her everything and me nothing, he shouted. I stood firm. You don't own me anymore. Saffron stepped forward, voice clear. Leave him alone. The crowd's stares silenced him, and he fled, his rage impotent. My loft became a haven. High ceilings, bare walls, Aurora's guitar waiting. I played folk songs at a downtown cafe, earning warm applause, not judgment. Across town, Sterling and Marigold downsized to a small apartment, their influence fading. Caspian's yoga studio closed amid scandal, his venomous texts fading to silence. Saffron visited often, her art blooming with newfound freedom. One autumn day, Sterling's shaky letter arrived, begging for reconciliation and money. On my balcony, I tore it to pieces, whispering, I choose myself. The mountains glowed as I played Aurora's guitar notes, carrying peace I'd only dreamed of. Freedom cost a family, but it gave me myself. That's the truth I live now.